Hey everyone, and welcome to Behind the Mask. I'm one of your co-hosts, EJ, and joining me today are my friends Lori
Hey.
and T.
Hello.
This is episode 5. We're calling it Masks and Etiquette of Invisible Illness. Chronic illness plagues this world, and while many have physical symptoms, many of us have illnesses that can't be seen, but are equally debilitating physically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually. Just a disclaimer that anything discussed in this podcast is not to be used as a diagnosis or a replacement for conversations with your own doctors, therapists, psychologists, or other medical professionals. And Lori is back today, and so she's going to hold on to the reins today and kind of guide us through this talk.
Thank you so much. I'll do my very, very, very best. I apologize in advance. I am a Zags fan, and we just got done getting ready to go into the final basketball game, and I've kind of been screaming and yelling with friends and family. So if I sound a little hoarse or a little different, I'm overly excited. But this is a topic that is really close to my heart. I personally have been suffering from a chronic illness for a little more than a decade now. And amazingly enough, when I was first diagnosed with my liver disease, I was told I had 2 to 5 years left to go. That's about how long they thought my liver was going to last. And guess what? I'm still here. I'm not a zombie. I live, breathe, eat. It's awesome. I still suffer. I do still have complications and problems, but I feel like, and have been told many times, I am a walking miracle. I just got off a surgery table of major surgery, and the doctor was like, I'm uncomfortable with this, Lori. I need you to know that I don't normally operate on people as sick as you. And I'm afraid I need you to talk to your sons and tell them they need to understand that there's a very real possibility you don't get up off that table. And I was like, okay, I promise, had the talk with my boys and close friends and family, and we all prayed about it, and we decided we're going forward with it. This is my best opportunity for a longer quality life, not just quantity, but quality, which is important. So I have chronic liver disease. I also have diabetes, which I've been dealing with for just under a decade. And I have several other little comorbidities, they're called, but we don't need to, go into all those details. But I remember in the first few years, just people telling me all the time, well, you don't look sick, you look fine. Or like I'd show back up to school or an event or something, and everybody would be like, oh, that's great. Like I got over a cold or something. And I'm like, I'm dying. No, this isn't a cold, so it felt kind of surreal sometimes because if you weren't in my inner circle, or I didn't specifically let you know, for the first, what do you think, Tina? First 5 years, you probably wouldn't have known that well.
Right.
Right?
I agree.
I really operated. I had a couple of hospital stays. I wasn't jaundiced, which a lot of people with liver disease do get. My type of liver disease, most of the time, it's the one thing we don't typically get too much of. But you wouldn't have known if I hadn't told you, or you, like I said, you weren't in that inner circle.
You definitely were the little engine that would not quit.
She still isn't.
That's right.
Exactly.
That's right. That's my motto in life. I think I can go. So, EJ, you too have what would be considered an invisible illness, right?
Yeah, I have a couple of them. The primary one that really affects a lot of it is I have polycystic ovarian syndrome, which I'll be 38 this year. And I was roughly diagnosed when I was about 20. My doctor picked up on some symptoms I was describing and some other physical symptoms that are very small that only like a medical professional who knew about it would really catch on.
Okay.
But I remember when when I was 20, that was in 2003. So we'd only had really the internet for like 10 years. So the research that I could do back then was very limited.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember she wrote down what it was called. She said, I want you to go home and research it. And the first thing I find, and mind you, I'm 20 years old. I have my whole life ahead of me. I have this idea of, I'm going to get married, I'm going to have kids, I'm saving myself for marriage. And the first thing I find out is one of the biggest side effects of this disease is that it can cause infertility.
Oh my gosh.
So at 20
That
years
would be
old, I was
pretty
basically
devastating.
told, and so I was really upset. And I was like, no, I don't have it. And I'm like, but then I did some research with some legit like sources, and I found some of the symptoms, and like I had quite a few of the boxes checked of the symptoms and side effects of it, so it's obvious that I have it.
Yep.
There are some physical tests they can do, but because, all right, getting a little personal, because I have never had been intimate with anybody, my doctor does not want to do those tests because they are very painful and could also expose me to something that I have thus far not been exposed to.
Okay.
So, though an official diagnosis has not been made, like as in blood work, all that, they're like 99% sure I have, and so am I,
Right.
and then, so that causes depression and anxiety. It causes issues with losing weight. It causes issues gaining weight. It causes a severe hormone imbalance throughout the month. So just right there, like all those, but they're all internal.
Right.
And yes, the weight gain is like external, but I've been overweight all my life, as I've talked about in previous podcasts. So it wasn't really on the radar of that was a symptom,
Right.
so it was invisible. Like all the cramping and the female stuff I was having going on was just not visible to anybody unless I specifically complained to my mom or a friend at school. And, when you're late teens, early 20s, you're in, late high school or early college, your friends are like, they don't really get that because they're, having their own lives, So a lot of them like didn't understand what what the problem was.
Right.
So EJ,
Hmm?
would you say in some ways the weight gain almost was like a masquerade? So it's like a sleight of hand, like people would assume that the weight gain must be something you're doing wrong
Right.
rather than something wrong with you.
Yep. Oh yeah. Pretty much everybody that sees me on in the street, I can pretty much guarantee they think I have diabetes and that I eat cake every day.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Because that's, I mean, honestly, that like bare bones, that's the assumption most people have when I talk about my diet. Like they think, oh, you don't eat that? No. And, which is one thing I do not have, and I'm grateful for. God has not given me it, or
Praise God.
however you want to look at it.
Yep.
Is I do not have diabetes. I have been checked for it. I do not have the symptoms of it. And my blood sugars are where they're supposed to be. My fasting blood sugars are where they're supposed to be. Thus far that I've seen over the years of being tested.
Yeah, I wish I had your A1C.
Yeah. For those who don't know, the A1C is basically a rough average of what your blood sugar has been for the last like 3 months.
90 days.
And mine is way below the normal range. So I'm like where I need to be for a normal person. And I attribute that to my mom. My mom, when she got pregnant with me, became a diabetic. And all my life, from the time I was born to the time that she died, she was diabetic. So I didn't grow up in a household that had a lot of candies, sweets, sugared sodas, lots of extra juices. Like if I had that stuff in the house, it was all diet sodas. And now to this day, like I can't even pick up like a regular Coca-Cola and drink it without wanting to gag because it's too sweet or just I can't stand it. So I'm grateful for my mom doing that. But then on top of like those kind of, the visual, everybody's seeing me. I also have no gallbladder now. So my digestive tract has decided it's doesn't like digesting things the same way as it used to. So again, it's all internal. So when I have like stomach ache from something I ate, it's all inside. Like there's no physical, like I don't limp because of it. I don't look pale because of it. So when I say, oh, my stomach hurts, they're like, whatever, just take a Tum and you'll be fine.
Right.
Yeah, it's not that easy,
Yep. Now, Tina, I know that I've heard you say in the past that you probably don't suffer from chronic illness, though I guess I would remind you of your migraines, which is considered chronic illness. It's, yes, one of the I don't know what you'd call that, minor, lesser ones, whatever, but.
Yeah, it's painless.
Oh, right.
The migraine itself is painless.
Stop it. Stop.
Well, it is. It is. No, seriously, it doesn't. I lose my sight. I can't see for a short
So you
period
get
of
the
time. Usually
ocular
very.
migraines, right? Yes.
Yes, they're called ocular
Okay.
migraines. And afterwards, I'll have a headache and nausea because it's like getting motion sick.
Okay.
But and they don't happen frequently, and I don't lose my vision completely. So, like, if it happens while I'm driving, I'm going to be perfectly fine driving. It's just I'm going to have a really bad after effect because, I'm going to be trying to peer through the spots so
Right.
intensely, and I'm already in a moving vehicle, which is I'm already prone to motion sickness.
Okay.
But
Okay. What experience would you say you do have with chronic illness?
well, I mean, personally for myself, I have high blood pressure, and that doesn't sound like a big deal, except for the high blood pressure came after I had a heart attack at 37.
Wow.
So, which, that kind of, I don't know, that's a trip. There's no family,
Family history of that.
no family background.
Yep.
Yeah. No family history. So now my kids now have to say they have a family history of it.
Right.
I had just gone to the doctor a couple weeks, month before the heart attack, and I'd always had really great blood pressure, like 121 over 69. Really good.
I have that.
And they were always surprised. That's the other thing too. So every time I walked into the doctor, they assumed because I was a little on the heavy side that I had diabetes.
Yep.
So they insistently checked it constantly to the point where to this day, they are so desperate to find diabetes that now they're telling me I'm pre-diabetic. It's like, what? Oh, you guys are getting, I'm pre-diabetic, not pre-diabetic, pre-diabetic.
What is that?
And
Is that even a thing?
I don't
It's
even
called
know.
human.
Yeah.
I mean,
Like,
honestly, anybody can be pre-diabetic or
Right.
pre-diabetic.
Wow.
Exactly. Anyway, but there was a slight bump in my blood pressure and a slight bump in my cholesterol, which is another thing they always checked because they were so sure that I was going to have horrible cholesterol, but they didn't notice the bumps because they were within a normal range.
Right.
And so they didn't look to see where it had been in the past, and so they weren't that worried about it. But now I consistently have high blood pressure and I'm on medication for it.
Yeah, it's interesting. We've all three mentioned, I think, in different ways, automatic assumptions that are made. And I know that, culturally, racially, gender-wise, what's the word I'm looking for? Age differences, right? There can be, a young person walks in and you think they're fine. They probably broke a bone or something else, right? And they're not overweight. And, I go in every time because I too am a little overweight. And, there's this automatic assumption that I have high blood pressure. I actually run in the 90s.
Oh
Yeah,
my goodness,
I have low
blood
blood
pressure.
pressure. I actually have to watch it, because I can drop through the floor sometimes. I literally, one of my tests, they couldn't even do my test until they brought my blood pressure up because I'd gone into like the 80s. They're like, yeah, we can't even perform this test because you're in your 80s, And so,
Right.
but they and then all the nurses and doctors just, are dumbfounded, that I have this blood pressure, and it's a thing. I'm not sure. I know that we have to, I don't know. The only thing else in life I think that I can really compare it with is I guess somewhat similar to what's called racial profiling, right? So you automatically assume when you go in a certain neighborhood or you see a certain person that these things must be happening, even if they aren't, right? And I feel like, yes, there's very, very much stereotyping within that medical system. If you are overweight, you automatically have high blood pressure, diabetes, and heart problems. If you are, too small and you're under your height percentile, you must have an eating disorder,
Mhm. Right.
Or on
or
drugs.
on drugs. Yes, of course. We can't forget that, Oh my gosh. And then because, okay, I do want to start out by saying I respect and know that there is a very real issue with the overuse of opioids. Okay. I want to state that from the beginning. At the same time, those of us who actually need pain medication currently at this time literally have to fight tooth and nail to get something we need for our pain. We have to fill out forms and papers and all this stuff. And there are people that legitimately need that pain medication that cannot get it. I was watching New Amsterdam.
It's like
Yeah, I
pulling
was
teeth.
watching New Amsterdam, which is a really great kind of new medical drama on TV. It's unrealistic in that some of the things that they do in there, just couldn't happen in today's hospital system, right? But I think that
Right.
that's what they're trying to do in the show, is to say, if we thought outside the box, if we stopped assuming this and we didn't do that, and we kind of broke the mold, so to speak, and said, "Wait, let's try again because this isn't currently working," what might happen? And I really like that about the show. But they just did an episode on exactly what I'm talking about, like 2 weeks back. And there were legitimate reasons these people were trying to get meds and they can't get them. And I think that that's, it's sad. So anyway, bringing me to one of the major points I wanted to start with. Roughly, and a lot of people don't know this, roughly 1/2 of the US population lives with at least one chronic illness. Diabetes, lupus, multiple sclerosis, back pain, migraines, and the list could literally go on forever. I mean, fibromyalgia, there's so many. And a lot of them are what has been termed invisible illness. If you didn't know, if you weren't on the inside, you weren't a family member, you wouldn't know that person standing right next to you. So they're like flipping a quarter, and the person next to you is...
Or the majority of their symptoms are internal, and you don't see anything.
It's totally invisible to you unless you know. So, so we would think, right, in this lovely open society and the loving, caring people that we are, it would stand to reason. That was a little sarcastic. Sorry, people. That we would think that most people would know basic etiquette skills when it comes to this subject matter. The response to that is no, we do not. I cannot tell you, since being diagnosed with a pretty major illness, how many people literally insert open mouth and insert foot. I mean, I know you, Tina, and you, EJ, have heard me say this. I'm sorry, but thank you for sharing that your aunt so-and-so on your second cousin's father's side survived whatever because he drank guava juice. Okay, thank you. I'm feeling so much better now. Much more. My hospital team didn't know that. I got to go share that with them. I'm sorry. I know. I can't help it, ladies. I get a little sarcastic about this because I hear it all the time. Or, you don't look sick. Or I know that I get a little sarcastic with this. But it is something that really hits close to home. And I co-facilitate a couple of chronic illness groups. And it is literally the number one thing that gets brought up in a chronic illness group is, how do I get people to understand? How do I get people to stop saying some of the most hurtful things, And we're in this group because we're talking about masks. I cannot tell you how many of those group members end up wearing masks for protection, out of fear,
Sometimes even only even around their like immediate
Right.
family members too.
It's not just other people. Like and so it's such a deep issue that I think needs to be embraced and needs to be talked about. And so I came up with a little list of some kind of do's and don'ts. Very simple. And, start out with, if we know not to kick the wheel of a wheelchair that someone is sitting in, why do we think it's okay to tell someone with an invisible illness, you don't look sick? Any ideas on that, Miss Tina?
First of all, even though I don't have really any significant chronic illnesses, I am the spouse of someone who does have a chronic illness,
That's
pretty
right.
significant. He's got cancer that will never go into remission, and celiac disease. And let me tell you, those two pack a powerful punch.
Oh, yeah.
And he hears that all of the time. But you don't look sick.
Right.
And if people have known him over a long period of time, they would understand he looks a lot different than he used to.
Yes.
So that is something he hears often. And what people don't see is how tired he is and how exhausted he is, etc. But from a mental health point of view, here's what I would suggest why people do that. They do that because they don't know what else to say.
Right.
They feel like they're being encouraging. They're trying to tell you, but you look good, right? Most of us want to hear we look good. But they don't understand the complexity of that simple statement that they think is being encouraging.
Yes. Yes. I would agree with that. Good thoughts. EJ, anything you want to add?
To the question of why about the wheelchair and that.
Yeah.
Chronic illness is a tough one because, I know we were talking earlier, and I kind of forgot to mention I have recently been diagnosed with a couple of other ones that are more physical, like visibly physical. But again, because of my weight, it's masking a lot of the like physical symptoms for most people. Like they don't think about looking at it and seeing that, and even my doctor, like 2 months ago, was like, "You're pretty healthy." Like she was like looking for something wrong. Like my lungs were good, my heart sounded good, my blood pressure was. I do have high blood pressure, but I'm on medication, and so it's monitored. So like she's like, your lungs are good, your heart sounds good, So there's all these things, and she's like, you're pretty healthy, aside from the weight, and I'm like, yeah, but the weight is the biggest thing. Like but it is affected by so many things, and it's not just I stop eating and I lose weight,
Right.
Like. And so there's that. I appreciate when people say, hey, you look like you've lost some weight, even if I know I haven't, but, it's encouraging. But on the other hand, if somebody doesn't know me and comes up to me and it's like, you don't look very healthy, because of my weight, and they can't justify it with anything, I try, like we were talking last week about bullying. And even with that, like it's such a touchy subject. Like I just kind of shrug it off,
Right.
But a lot of it comes from people not understanding.
Yeah.
Because it's so ingrained in the world around us to only see what we can see in the world. I mean, spiritually, like as a Christian, we're taught to, believe in the things we don't see. But in the world, that's not the case. So we're told to see only what our eyes show us. Well, everybody's eyes are going to see things differently.
Right.
And so we have these times when we find out somebody has a chronic illness, our first response should be, I'm sorry to hear that. How are you handling it? Instead of, well, you don't look sick.
Right.
So.
Which is interesting because that really does kind of lead right into my first do thing. Mm-hmm. And so, let's start with the positive. If you have a friend or a relative or somebody that that has been recently diagnosed, one of the do's is do ask questions, listen, and encourage. Mm-hmm. These are the most important things you can actually do after somebody's been diagnosed or that you find out about their illness. You want to listen, you want to ask lots of questions, and then get those responses. Don't assume you know the answers, and then yes, encourage. You always, yes, we do want to be encouraging. So the first, leading us into that first don't, which is don't try to cure them or comment negatively about their treatment plan. Especially if you're not a doctor or a nurse, please, they really don't need you to comment negatively about their treatment plan or question it.
I will
And it,
caveat that before you go on. You say doctor and nurses, but you also have to remember there's other medical professionals out there like nutritionists and stuff.
okay, right. Yes.
Well,
yes.
well, no, and
Yeah.
but that's the thing, like, because I literally just had a conversation with a nutritionist for the first time ever in my life, and they pointed something out to me that she's like, yeah, doctors don't often think about that when they put people on that medication, that it can cause, it's omeprazole, it's something for heartburn, which I do have. It can inhibit and limit the absorption of certain vitamins into my system, which I didn't know. So she's like, I
Like
think you're
calcium's a big one.
calcium, B12, and vitamin D. Those are three. And I've been like,
Oh,
I've been taking B12 and vitamin D for like 7 years, and I just found out there's a good chance that like my omeprazole's been not letting it get absorbed into my system. So I'm like,
and
not
those
real
are
happy
big
about that.
deals.
So like nutritionists, people in the medical field, not just like doctors and nurses.
Okay,
Though
right.
I do work.
Yeah.
So I do get where you were coming from. I just wanted to caveat, like other people in the medical professional field who have a
Right.
degree.
Okay,
are
yes,
more-
medical field would have been better. Yes. Yes.
Well, no, it's fine. It's honestly, this is the first time I'd ever had a conversation with a nutritionist, like a licensed, registered dietary nutritionist.
Yep.
Yep. And so they are not doctors, they're not nurses, but they also work in a specific field. So when you have the specialists, those are even better.
Right. And I know that doctors and nurses really value like nutritionists and dietitians.
Mm-hmm.
They put a lot of value on them and rely on them a lot to help with kind of putting the whole package together for medical care.
Well, so much. I say all the time in my chronic illness groups, it is so important to build a team. You know, that when you've been diagnosed, one of the biggest things you can do is to build your team and make
That is
sure
so
that
hard to do.
It is.
Because half the time the team members don't want to be in the team.
Right. So
They're mavericks.
Yes, it does take time and it takes effort. I'm a faithful person. It takes prayer. It takes courage to stand up and speak and find your voice. There's a lot of things it takes. But if you do those things, you can create a team. But yes, jump on in.
Okay, so I had a couple of thoughts that kind of came in while you were talking, and we're talking about building a team, and we're talking about what our loved ones can do, what loved ones can do for someone who's chronically ill or friends. First of all, I kind of want to mention it depends at where you're at in the circle, like asking a lot of questions. So if I was talking to my local grocery store clerk and they start asking me a crap ton of questions about my current status, I'm going to be a little offended. Well, I won't be because I'm not like that, but I could be, or it could be too much. It could be overwhelming to have to answer the same questions over and over again. So be sensitive to that.
Yes.
But the other piece too that to be aware of is that if you are closer in, that might be an area that your love could use help in, is building that team, because so many people are too sick to stay on top of their medical team. Too sick to make sure everybody's talking to each other and to fill out all that paperwork and to sit on the phone for hours on hold while you wait for someone to bother to answer your call. I mean, I go through that with my husband all of the time.
It's interesting that you say that, Tina, because my current caregiver, Layla, and I were talking the other day, and she said, Lori, she goes, I've had clients before that couldn't do what you do. You know what I mean? She said, there's just no way. She said they couldn't even sit on that phone for 2 hours. They couldn't.
Right.
We spent last Friday morning on the phone with nurses, nutritionists, doctors for we were on and off the phone for over 4 hours trying to get my meds, because after the surgery, all my meds have to be liquid. And so we were trying to get the right dosages down and all of this stuff. And it took us 4.5 hours.
Yeah.
I was exhausted.
Exactly.
My day was shot. Anything that I had planned for that day was done. I couldn't, I was exhausted. And I made it through it. And we got through the day, but it was definitely very, very, very difficult.
I know someone who had no social support whatsoever.
Right.
And she has got an alphabet soup of chronic illnesses, and she is trying to manage these things on her own. And she did have a limited support system, but because one doctor, because she had an emergency, he didn't know her case, and he made decisions and then told her limited support that she was a drug addict. Her social support fell apart, and every medical professional treats her like a drug addict now, and she is fighting through that. And she
Oh my
doesn't
God.
That's
have the
heartbreaking.
energy to get through it.
No.
So
No.
that's the other. If you have a loved one who has a chronic illness, what, in my opinion, what they need more than anything is allies.
Yes. Yes. I would agree. So,
You and your family need to be your own advocate, because unfortunately, even though the medical professionals will help you out, they can only do so much,
Mm-hmm.
and you have to fight them tooth and nail to get to the care they need.
right. Right.
And she used to be a nurse, and they still won't. This doctor still wouldn't listen to her, and he put it in
Oh,
her
wow.
charts. So every medical professional from here on out is going to see that.
Right. Right.
And
Remember my famous doctor
mhm.
tried to put in my charts that craziness affected me every time I went into that particular hospital.
Yeah.
It was very not okay. Yeah. I still get irritated when I think of that man. Okay, that'll lead us into the second don't, which is don't tell them that they must or need to fight their disease. Why do you think I said that one?
Because they're not in your shoes. You're not in that person's shoes. You have no idea what fighting looks like for that person. Sometimes
right.
just waking up and sitting up in any way is a fight.
Mm-hmm.
So you have no
Amen.
idea what that means.
Amen. If we get some time, we're going to talk about one of my favorite things, which is called the spoon theory. If not, we'll go back to it again in another time. But it's the idea that you literally, as a healthy person, you have so much ability within your life to go through your day. And if by chance you need a little more, you borrow from the next day. But when you have a chronic illness, your day starts with 3/4 to half that same amount. And yet you still have to get through the same 24-hour time period. And if you're bold enough or unwise enough to borrow from the next day, you could be down for the count for anywhere from 48 hours to the next week, because your body, when it's chronically ill, doesn't have the reserves to back that up.
Or the
And then
bounce
you're down.
back.
Right, that's what I mean. There is no bounce back often
Mm-hmm.
with the chronically ill. So here's what you do want to do. We do want to have grace and patience for something that you honestly, as T referred to, you can't possibly understand. Oftentimes, one of the things where this really comes into play a lot, kind of a misunderstanding, is when a chronically ill person disappoints you. There's two big things. They're not doing it to you personally. They don't always, I'm often known for saying, my body hijacked me. Like I didn't have control. It's not by choice that I'm not there or at that meeting or, whatever. And also, it's important to remember that when they're not fighting, when they're not winning, as you would say, right? They are not letting their disease win. Like that makes sense if you're in a sport or you're in a, something else, you didn't do this or you didn't do that. Like there is somehow sort of at least in a realm of your control. When you have chronic illness, you don't have that realm of control.
All right. Having a chronic illness is like, when you think about, it's not a sprint, it's a marathon.
Amen. The longest marathon you're ever going to run.
Right. Yeah, it's like a cross-country marathon, whereas a sprint is like that 100-meter dash. You can get there. That's like a broken arm.
Mm-hmm.
That'll heal. You'll do some therapy. You're going to be back to normal in 4 to 6 months. Unfortunately, a chronic illness is the complete opposite.
Right.
You get that diagnosis and you're affected for it for the rest of your life.
Right.
And once you get a chronic illness, usually they're not curable. but you can treat the symptoms.
Yep. Yep.
And only those symptoms can be treated for so long,
That's right.
or with the minimum amount of medication, and then that medication might increase, and then it'll increase.
So one of the things, so a couple of things that kind of come to mind with this is, first of all, I'm watching my husband. He's always struggling with that. He's used to being, first of all, the big man in the room, the strong man in the room, the go-to guy, the one who gets everything done, and then suddenly he couldn't. So it's
Right.
an identity adjustment for most people
Oh,
with
yes.
this. They're already having all of this crisis of like, who am I now? Who am I now
Right.
compared to who I was? And knowing that this world has an expectation for you to be the same person. And it's not just the physical things that changes, it's the very foundation of who that person is that changes, because they have to readjust so many things. And one of my challenges, not only to like my husband or anyone else who is chronically ill, but anyone who's in that life with them, is you need to readjust how you define success, how you define winning, how you define any aspect of your life. That has to be done. And because of that, there's a sense of grief and loss that has to be gone through.
Right.
And so
Right.
having grace with each other for that is so very, very important. And
Yes, it is.
just like grief and loss, you're going to go through the stages. You're not going to go through them in order. You're probably going to go back to some and revisit them again, like anger and, you know, trying to find acceptance and denial, back to acceptance again. And then chronic illness never just throws one thing at you. You know, it's like a dominoes effect. So you'll have this
Like
one
I said,
symptom,
my body hijacks me.
and you'll think, okay, I've got this symptom. I can manage it. I'm used to it. Oh God, here's another one.
Right.
You know, now
Right.
I have to try something else. Meanwhile, your medical team, if they exist, are throwing all these different things at you too. So, you know,
It's true.
there's a lot of measuring how you measure success. So winning,
Oh, amen.
the definition of winning is going to be different for each person. Right.
That's right. That's right.
Apparently, I had a lot to say about
Yeah, and it's yeah. Well, no, and I'm glad you brought up the grief and loss, because I think grief and loss, everybody just associates that with losing somebody, losing a loved one because they passed away. But every time you get a chronic illness or a diagnosis that could be a permanent change in your life, you can go through grief and loss and all of that. Like the stages where we talk about like the anger and the depression and the resentment and the all those different stages, and everybody goes through them differently and different lengths of time, and they don't always just go through them once. They could go through them multiple times.
I could do an entire
Because
thing on that, because the stages of grief
yeah,
that you have to go through, the stages of loss, loss of this, loss of that, and you have to, so stages when you're in something like chronic illness, it is like this
roller coaster.
you compare roller coaster, and you're up and you're down and you're up and you're down, and I can't tell
Sometimes
you how
both at
many
once.
times, right? I can't tell you how many times I've said, I'm tired. Can I just get off for a little while? I'm tired. I can't, and I think I wanted to talk about it a little bit later, but just that I totally understand people who want to give up. I never in my life thought that those words were going to come from my mouth. I get it in a way that I never got it before. I truly grasp what it means to just kind of to want to give up, to just say, okay, ollie ollie oxen free. I give up. Come out. I'm done. Game over.
How many times over the years, Lori, have you and I had discussions about, usually it would start with you saying, why do I have to keep being strong?
Oh, yes, yes.
And can I
That's right.
time I can take a break strong because you felt like you had to live
Yep.
up to everybody else's expectations of what strong was. And this is another
Oh,
example
yes.
of defining strong.
Yes. Amen. And those definitions need to be redefined. So, um, I want to move into our next thing, and it's going to sound obvious, but you wouldn't believe how many times it's happened. I have a good friend who personally, said something to me one time. She's like, I never got it until I was where you were, you know? So please don't get excited when you travel with your friend who has an invisible illness and you get the benefits of their disabled parking permit. I know that it sounds simple and it sounds crazy that I even have to say that out loud, but I can't tell you it just slips off the tongue, and it happens. Or I didn't understand, like, until I was, somebody with a disabled parking permit, right? You go to get out of your car, and again, we have invisible illnesses. There's no wheelchairs. I do sometimes have to use a cane or a walker, but some days I'm actually feeling better, but that doesn't mean that I can walk from the back of the parking lot, into the store.
Right.
What if there's no carts that I can use, which happens a lot? So there are days that I have to bring my walker with me, even though I don't feel like I need it, because once I get into the store, my body's only going to allow me to do about a quarter of what I think I can do. And then I get about halfway through a shopping trip and I've got to find an aisle, get out of the way, and sit down on my walker, because it's got a seat, and and I get looks, and if you get out of the car without any visible thing, I cannot tell you how many glares and horrible looks and smirks, and people have literally commented while walking by, must be nice, and you're like, excuse me? No, this is not nice. No, I don't want this. I need this, and but they can't see it. And so there's just this, it's horrible. I just, ugh, it kind of makes my stomach nauseous.
Which then, goes to the where we were talking about the stereotypes. Somebody looks at you, they don't see an illness, so they automatically assume you're lying about it, and you're utilizing somebody else's pass or whatever.
Yeah.
And I'm a caregiver, so when my client is in the car, they have a parking placard. I don't have it up all the time because I'm not the one licensed to use it.
Right.
Or I keep it up there, so I don't lose the thing, because those things are like gold.
They are.
You lose it, you're like,
I don't think people
stuck for
realize
like 5
how
years.
difficult it is to actually get one.
Oh man. And now the hoops are even worse.
And the
Yes.
I know somebody that has to renew
Yeah.
it.
and the
Ugh.
stigma around those are so steep that even
Mhm.
like when my mother-in-law was still alive, she had them because she couldn't go very far, and she was always like encouraging me to park in a handicapped spot. And she would, it was almost like she was treating me. But oftentimes, what I would do instead would be drop her off at the doors, go park and meet her.
I'm so happy you just said that, because
Right.
that was my do. I said, do be happy to drop us off at the front, park, and catch up. And please keep your joy to yourself, because you got to park up front. Please, please, please. Try to keep it to yourself. Yeah. That was awesome, Tina. You went right into that. I love it. I love it.
It was an accident.
I totally love it. So next, don't claim that your friend is lucky they don't have to work, don't have
Oh,
kids, or don't have to travel, or lucky because they're so young. These are just some of the things that people tell us we're lucky about. Oh man, yeah. Okay, I'm gonna leave this one alone because I could just talk about it forever. It definitely
Yeah,
stings.
probably a good idea because I'll say something I don't want to say.
Um,
I'm
T,
cutting that
got
out.
anything you want to share?
I wanna kind of remind people that quality of life is super important, and one of the
Amen.
aspects of quality of life is productivity and having a meaning of life. And one of the things that I have to work with my clients the most is just that, um, because a lot of them are on disability for one reason or another, and they get a lot of the same comments. And what I'm
Yep.
dealing with is increased depression. And one of the things we know from our elderly folks is that once they retire, their chances of depression increase dramatically because they don't
Right.
have a sense of what they're going to do next, or that they have something to contribute, or this or that. So when the next time you think, oh gosh, they're so lucky they don't have to work, actually, that is one of the highest rates, highest causes of depression, which lead to suicide. So
Yep.
instead of thinking how lucky they are, maybe it might be if you see that they don't have any sort of thing that's keeping them busy or feeling like they're have something to, you know, feel productive and good about getting done, it might be having a conversation of what they like to do and help inspire them to do those things if they're able within
Yes.
their means, within their reasons. Um,
Right. Right.
So I actually have I think kind of like you guys the same thing with my husband. You know, he could have just said, "Hey, cool, I'm retired," but it was so hard for him that
Right.
we searched and searched and searched until we found hobbies that he could do when he was feeling well enough.
Right.
And
It
it,
is
Yeah.
so easy to lose purpose.
Right.
I what
well,
am I doing? And you've heard me say, Tina, too. I've said I think people think that I sit at home eating bonbons and watching soap operas.
yeah, I've heard you say that a few
I
times.
literally, oh my God, I do.
Mhm.
But
I'm like, oh, yeah, my life is gravy over here. So lovely. Oh, the one
That's all you can eat
oh
right now.
gosh, stop it. Oh my God. Oh,
Sorry.
I can't laugh. Laughing is bad. Um, you have to use stomach muscles to laugh, and I can't use those yet. Um, um, I get, I wish I could take a nap. I'm like, no,
well,
you
here's the
don't.
thing. I think you guys may hear that less now after a year of COVID. I think of the
Yes,
whole world got
maybe.
of what it's
That is
like
true.
to
Yeah.
go through each day not being able to go to work or do something protective and then worry about all the things that are going to happen because they're not doing.
Do you mean, T, that there might be a silver lining to a pandemic?
Oh, please.
Oh, I love you. I love you. You went right there. Oh, I love you. I love finding my silver linings.
Yeah. Yes and no. And I think there'll also be the opposite too. Um, I think that those people who have very active lives and have been basically shut in for the last year ish have gotten a taste of what it's like to be at home and to not do that. But I also think those of us, myself included, who's an essential worker, which I have a chronic illness and I
Right.
have to work.
Yeah.
um, I think there could be some animosity of those people who are essential workers. And I'm saying like healthcare workers as well as like store clerks, truck drivers, people delivering. I mean, all those essential workers that we see on a daily basis. Because I know personally, I would have really liked to have some time off to like
Right.
clean out my
But
house.
here's the thing. Here's the thing,
And by the
EJ.
way, the chronically ill person wasn't cleaning out their house. Didn't matter whether it was COVID or not. Sorry,
Right.
folks. Okay.
Right.
Right. Right. No,
The
I
people who
just mean
stuck at
like,
home with COVID,
you
it
know,
couldn't work because they weren't.
Right.
right.
Here's something I'm
Right.
curious about, EJ, is that even though you still had to work, um, but other than work, not being able to go do the things you normally might have done easily, do you think that gave you an insight at home when you weren't working?
Well, so here's the thing about me. I am happy as a
Me too.
clam to sit at home on my computer and watch
Me
TV
too.
and play games. So, I am an introvert. I am happy by myself. I enjoy being with people at times. So yes, not being around people. I do miss hugs. But I was perfectly. Let's put it this way: this pandemic did not change a ton for me because don't often like I'm not a nightlife person where I like, go out every night or anything like that. Or I'm constantly going out to eat. It is a little different, that I couldn't go like meet up
Like
with
coffee or
somebody for like
something. Yeah.
hot cocoa or coffee or
See,
something. Um,
I
so that there were changes that I don't enjoy, and I do miss like the physical touch of like hugs and stuff. But for me, since I am such an introvert and I enjoy being at
mhm.
home, I didn't mind it as much. And I'm great. Just don't take it this wrong. I am grateful for my job. Like, I'm grateful that I had a job, that I didn't lose my job, and that I still
Amen.
have a job. We were compensated with hazard pay, so it's not like we weren't being compensated. But there were parts of me that I'm like, and I really wish I could be home for like a couple of weeks,
I
even a
did
week.
that at times too. I was very grateful that I was able to still, I mean, I literally could go to work because there was no one at my office and I would just do telehealth. So I had that option. And I'm the same. I'm an introvert. I recharge by having my me time, by not having to talk. That's a good recharge for me. But I ended up in a depression and not even seeing it coming because of that lack of the total lack that I ended up with.
Right.
Right.
But I think that there were even people who were able to work, but not, and also I an area where we weren't as strict on quarantine
Okay.
and
Right.
stuff like that. So I had a little bit more people interaction than some areas of the states.
Yeah.
That's true.
But there were areas of the whole world that were so shut down that even the essential workers were isolated when they weren't working.
Right.
It was really weird having to carry a
I
letter
did.
around
Mhm.
for like 6 months to verify that I was an essential worker.
I had the
I
It was
know
very weird.
my
I
sons
never
had
had to
those. Yeah.
show it, but it was weird to just know that I had to keep that in my car at all times because if a cop pulled me over and I was traveling or going to the store for my client, they wanted to know where I was going, I was like, it was weird.
Yeah.
That was
We
eerie.
never had, I got a letter at the beginning, but it ended up at the bottom of my purse because that's just not the way it was in our area.
Yeah.
And we didn't have, I mean, we had a small spike at one point, but anyway, we're now on a COVID conversation. I don't know if we want to be there.
Yeah. 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 I don't want to go into that. So let's moving back towards
No.
the don'ts and the do's. Don't comment on assistive devices. It sounds like a crutch, or they're giving into laziness or hopelessness. And the same goes for their appearance. Diabetic shoes are simply ugly compared to sassy heels or cool Converse. And if your friend could put the effort in and still be able to attend an event, don't you think they would?
Well, and I think that also goes with like what they, how like the comfort the level they have too. Like if they go out and they want to go out in sweats and a t-shirt, let them.
It may be a minor miracle that they're
Don't
walking out
bring
their front door.
exactly. And we all have good days and
Amen.
bad days. I have my days where I'm like, I want to get out of my pajamas.
He
And
has those
there are
often.
days where I'm like,
Just calling it like I see it, sister.
Yep.
and and I was just thinking, I'm like, we are getting to a point where we may be going back into more in-person meetings. And I'm like, oh, does that mean I have to like change my pants more than once a week? I know that sounds crazy, but like,
There's people out
you
there
know,
admitting right
but
now that they weren't even wearing any pants. Just saying.
yeah, and but then on the other hand, we also have to remember that there are people who. My dad lives in a skilled nursing facility, who's a double leg amputee, and he chooses to wear the hospital gowns. He's like, because if I spill something on him, I don't have to worry about ruining my
Right.
good shirt. So it's legit, it's but my, like, again, and it's what, early April. It's been now 13 months since I
That
saw
always
my
makes
dad
me
last.
cry. Hugs to your dad when you do see him. I'm not
And
over there, so I miss him and
I
his
wish I
big
could go
cheesy
for
grins
Easter.
and all his funny comments. And he's a hoot, man. He's a hoot.
Yeah. Yeah, so and for him, like, when I see him, it's tough because I have to, like, remember, because, like, you guys were saying earlier about, it's the quality of life, quantity of life, all that stuff. I'm sure he struggles with that. Him and I haven't had a conversation about that with him,
Yeah.
recently. And I'm sure he's struggling with that. He does fine, he is like me, or I'm like him. He's a very, like, introvert. So for him, watching TV is his enjoyment, watching movies. He's not a social butterfly. So he, I miss him, and I know he misses me. But I think he's content with his little, crossword puzzles and watching TV and the news and stuff. But I know it's definitely not what he wanted his retirement to
Right.
be.
Definitely not.
Like, him and my mom both had, these grand dreams of, like, he'd retire and then she'd retire a few years later, and they'd buy an RV and travel all the time because I could stay home with the pets and work full time, and travel with them when I wasn't working, and
So
Life
he
changes.
got sick.
so it's not only just
Yeah.
about how we define something. It's not assuming what the other person's
Mhm.
definition is.
Amen.
Right.
Amen.
That's a really good point.
Yep. In my mind, I was thinking this isn't even just a chronic illness etiquette. This is etiquette of life. I literally can hear my grandmother in my head. If you don't have anything nice to say, don't say anything at all. You know what I mean? Like, oh yeah.
Oh, you got that too?
Right?
I know that exact
Got
phrase.
it all the
I got that
time.
all the time.
I keep
But
those
sometimes,
comments to yourself. If you have nothing nice to say, silence is golden. Remember that one. Silence is golden.
I would challenge that,
It's
though.
not
I would
just.
actually challenge that because I want people to be authentic with me. I don't want them to shine me on.
Okay, yeah, I don't want anybody to tiptoe around me. No.
There's a way to have conversations that might be difficult. Like, for example, Lori, I'll throw you and I under the bus. Let's say I had
Okay.
some thoughts and ideas that, and I do this to you all the time anyway. We do this for each other. But let's say
Right.
I had something to say that you didn't like so well, but it was a concern
Okay.
and I wanted to talk about it. I could approach it just like that because you're still my friend. You may be chronically ill, but I could still approach it. Say, hey, Lori, I had some thoughts. I was wondering if you're open to them right now. But
Okay, but let's clarify this. You're in the inner circle, so you already have a different starting point.
okay,
Do you know what I'm saying?
okay,
So
true.
an acquaintance
But even
versus somebody in that inner circle can definitely, I will agree with you, can definitely get away with, hey, I mean, in life, as disciples, right? As people of faith, right?
right,
We want to hold each other accountable, be transparent. These are all things that people of faith talk about, right?
right.
Yes.
But
We never want to stop doing those things.
right.
But it's more the barbs or those comments that
Yeah,
are really just better left unsaid.
right. Those absolutely exist. But I think
Right. Yeah.
that if I had an acquaintance that was struggling and had a chronic illness
and I could see an idea that might be helpful. Now, I wouldn't come at them and say, you're doing that wrong. I wouldn't come at them and saying, well, you shouldn't do it that way, or this way is better. What I would do is say, I was wondering if you'd be open to a conversation about it. I may not use those words exactly, but that's essentially
Right.
asking.
But I would be totally open to that.
Right.
If that's how you approach me. I would be. I'd be, I mean, be like, well, I guess it's time. Okay,
So
yeah, we can have that conversation.
It's sort of like when I'm talking to someone who says, oh yeah, I'm diabetic, as they're eating a candy bar. Now, I would never call them out for that. But if they said, I'm diabetic, my sugars are low, so I'm eating this candy bar, I would likely find a kind way to ask a few probing questions.
Which is probably good.
Right.
Because why did you get low? Why did you, right? I mean, there's reasons often when we go low,
But it's sort of in what I do for a living is kind of where that comes in. I understand that. So I would tend to be like, okay, well, what I do is I'm the Columbo. I'm like, well, I'm curious. I thought those kind of sugars made it worse.
Right. Well, they can. You do have to have that quick, easy, just FYI, you do have to have that quick, easy
Right. I just
to get it to jump back up.
Kept a bag of chocolates by her bed to control her sugars. So
probably not the best thing. Peanut butter is a little better. Milk is awesome. Chocolate milk, according to the pharmacist, is one of the absolute amazing things.
Milk.
Yes, chocolate milk is a very, very, don't get all excited, Erin. Really?
I haven't had real chocolate milk in like months.
Well, it's just, so here, the basics of diabetes, it's because there's a protein with it, and the protein helps that glycemic index not jump too far and then drop, right?
Right.
So I'm trying to think, so the boys, okay, we would be out. You guys know me. I am still sometimes, not near as much in the last couple of years as my body, since my stroke has really hijacked me. But prior to stroke, I've been known to forget to eat, skip a meal. And I would be like, I'd be out, I'm trying to get all my stuff done, right? Because I know my body's going to fail me in about an hour. And it's like, okay, I'm like laser focused on what I'm doing, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I'd be with the boys, we'd be out, we'd be doing something, and I would crash horribly. And Alex is the perfect example, because he would always just throw that question, and they're like, so Mom, when was the last time you ate? Did you even eat lunch? I'd be like, oh my gosh, when was the last? I have no idea when the last time I ate was, and so he was lovingly doing that, not he's like, Mom, when was the last time you ate? Because I have a feeling it has to do with that, and then I'd have to, get something in and, move on, and usually down a glucose tablet and then find some protein, and go. But and Alex was great. He always did it with humor. He always it was like this. His timing, of course, was great. And you'd kind of look at him and go,
There was a lack of judgment.
I don't know.
There was a lack of judgment.
Yes, there was definitely a lack of judgment. Yeah, he was just like honestly saying, Mom, when's the last time you ate?
So we can have hard conversations without judgment.
Amen. That's it. That's a key. Mm-hmm. That's right there. That's a key.
And without
Grace,
condescending.
Patience, and no judgment. No condescending. Yes.
And my favorite approach is curiosity. So that way the person has the opportunity to indicate. They may not say the words, but you can read their face, you can read their body. That will indicate that they're only being polite and saying, sure, I want to hear what you say.
We did just have a couple of, episodes on communication. So this is just right in there with that. So okay, so we're almost to the end of the list here. Don't one-up their story. Everything is not a competition.
Amen.
And each experience is relative to each individual's experience. I have such and such, and I have this, and and they don't need to hear that. That is not comforting in any way, and it is not helpful.
I have watched my husband go through that, where he will be talking about something he's feeling, and someone will be like, his cancer's in his liver, so he has a lot of side pain, and he's got a history of a broken back and injured shoulders where he had to have surgery. So he'll be talking about one of those things, and someone will be like, "Oh yeah, like when I there's this one time I tripped and and I'll be just sitting there looking at him like, what?"
As I say, and this has what to do with the price of tea in China?
Yeah. It's like, are you kidding me right now?
I'm really sorry that you broke your toe. Don't think it even matches to what he just said. Yeah. Oh
Yes,
my gosh, that's hilarious.
You are so empathizing with him right now.
That is not empathy. We're going to get to some definitions here in just a minute, and that is not empathy. I just want to tell you folks, that's not empathy. Oh, oh man.
Well, I kind of feel like we've covered.
Well, we have a little
segment
bit.
2
So
already.
I do want to say, really, just to kind of close this out, we have talked about listening, appreciating a different. You're
What was
so
that?
funny.
I'm
I'm not sure if you're going to actually bleep that part out or go with it.
We've only been, we're not even through 10 segments. Oh no.
I can't stop laughing now. You guys, that hurts my stomach. Stop it. It really does hurt.
I thought we
Okay.
were.
Oh yeah, you two are evil over there. You two are just evil over there. Okay, so we've been talking about so a lot of listening, appreciating different perspectives. We want to acknowledge that you may. Oh, okay. So this is the biggest thing you can actually do. Because here's the thing: we are all going to find ourselves in one of these positions where we open the mouth and all of a sudden something comes out and we go. So what do you do when you do that? You actually have to acknowledge that you may have done or said any of those things. You got to own it. You don't want to be one of those friends who might actually be easier to avoid. All of the things that we've talked about seem really simple, but somehow when we encounter invisible illness, and I think T, you can speak to this too, but our fears, our doubts, and our comprehensions seem to drive our responses. When really what we need is acknowledgement, validation, and encouragement. Those should be our go-tos.
So I'm gonna throw myself under the bus a little bit. I'll try not to go too far under that I can't be pulled back out. But so I was around when, Lori, you were first diagnosed, and you were sick just beforehand. I remember that I had a very hard time understanding it because I couldn't see it. And so things that I was used to from you and I wasn't getting from you was very difficult. And oftentimes I took it personally,
good to know.
Yeah. So, and I think that's really easy to do, is that when we can't see it, we put our own assumptions on it. We assume we know what is the reason for it. And so being aware of our own insecurities when dealing with someone who says they have a diagnosis, just because you can't see it doesn't mean they're faking it. It's not that I thought you were faking it, Lori. I just couldn't see it, so I didn't understand what it meant. And it's like, and you kind of referred to this a lot earlier on, actually, but how it's not just a cold. right? And I remember
Right.
that I would be like, oh, she's having a good day. She must be getting better. And,
Oh, wow.
and so
Wow.
I think, if my memory worked well enough for me to remember things, I'm sure there were things I said and did during that time that I didn't understand. Like I just didn't get it. And so it's really easy to do is sort of the point to fall
It
into
is.
that. And it is so important to own it when you know it. You may not,
Yes.
but have enough grace to know that you're not always going to catch it when you do it.
Amen. We all make mistakes.
Right. So,
And we all say things. That's why it's called a slip of the tongue.
right. Absolutely. And so, but one of my things I've always been real strict on myself for is that sense of accountability, owning what I do. I know I'm going to make mistakes. I don't beat myself up most of the time for the mistakes that I make. I just own it, and I am prepared to make amends if I'm needed to. But otherwise, after that, I'm ready to move on, and I expect the other person to be able to as well, in one way or the other, either together or if needed, apart. But and there's nothing wrong with that sometimes, because we do make mistakes. Sometimes we make big mistakes that you can't come back from and fix that relationship. But both people can have enough
Yes.
self-respect to be able to let bygones be bygones, so to speak. But
So I am really glad you said that, because one of the things that I often do with my chronic illness groups is I will definitely listen. I'll let them vent. I'll let them tell me what happened, right? And how hurt they were and everything like that. And one of the things and I know EJ has really specifically heard me say this because she's in my current chronic illness group that I'm co-facilitating. I will also hold you accountable. Because just because you have a chronic illness, you don't get to not practice grace, not practice patience, not practice compassion. I need you, we all of us have to be reminded that we're infallible, imperfect human beings. And we're all going to make mistakes, and everybody has to own. We have to not only own the mistakes, but then we have to educate ourselves. We have to seek out a different scenario, right? We gotta practice. When I first got diagnosed with liver disease, so I'm gonna give you the official term. I have cirrhosis. Okay, I had to really work at being able to say that out loud, because I don't know about the rest of you, but even in my own, so I go in, I'm, 2 weeks post-op, and the doctor says, let's go to my office. And I'm like, let's not. I don't want to go to your office. No,
yet.
let's just stay here. Right. I'm like, no. And he's like, come on, we got to talk. And he's like, when we were in there, he goes, I had to biopsy your liver and you have cirrhosis. And I remember, I think if my jaw could have literally hit the floor, I would have been, I was dumbfounded. I was like, and I said out loud, wait a minute, isn't that for like alcoholics and ex-druggies? Like those words came from my mouth after you just heard me say all those don'ts, right? And he was like, Lori, there are 47 different kinds of liver disease. And I was like, oh, I didn't know that. I had no idea. All I knew about is what I saw on TV. And almost every single thing that I ever heard in the media, or, people that you heard about getting liver transplants and, all these things, it was because of alcohol, or blood transfusion is another pretty popular one. Hep C a little bit is definitely more prevalent, but they're all things that were, very kind of some obvious causes, right? And
They were all user errors.
They were, right? Yes, user error. Oh my gosh, that's so horrible that we have to say that. But yes, so when I first talked about my diagnosis, I said that. And that was the immediate, you know, you said you could just see in their eyes that they weren't really listening, right? I would say the word cirrhosis, I would get looks of disgust. I would get looks of, oh, you're one of those, you know? And I was like, so I really had to put some thought into it. And that's why I don't say any longer that I have cirrhosis. I say I have chronic liver disease. But that took research, it took prayer, it took being creative and thinking about it and saying, what can I say that doesn't automatically get me this?
The other one you've always done, and to this day you'll sometimes use still, non-alcoholic cirrhosis.
Right. I have non-alcoholic cirrhosis. And people are like, oh, that's a thing? Yes, it is. Thank you very much. It's a thing. So, yes, I do use that non-alcoholic. And because I have 2 underlying causes for my liver disease, and neither one of them has to do with alcohol, drugs, blood transfusions, anything like that. And so, and as I said, I was blown away that there are 47 different kinds of liver disease. I'm like, really? And now I know what a lot of them are. And, you know, it's been a fascinating journey. I'll give it that, you know. I often say I would not wish chronic illness on my worst enemy. But what I would wish on everyone is the clarity that a diagnosis in chronic illness can bring. My zeal, if you will, got even more for life. The true appreciation, the learning to value each and every moment that I'm given is, I wish people could grasp that without having to go through. But then that would be like, you know, I climbed Mount Everest, but I didn't really climb it. I went there on an airplane and got dropped off, you know, or you didn't really do the climb. And that clarity comes from empathy, which is going to lead us into the next part. So I really feel like people don't understand the differences between sympathy, compassion, and empathy. They're very actually different things. And we, especially in America, we kind of just put them all under one umbrella and just use whatever word comes to mind, when it doesn't actually really apply. So compassion really, really has to do with action, right? You see something, hear something, and you respond in a heartfelt, sympathetic way. But it's not empathy, and it's not sympathy. And so sympathy, and we in America often put sympathy with I can't think now. Maybe it will come back to me. Say that to me.
Sympathy is often aligned with pity.
Yes, thank you. That was exactly what I was going to say. It is aligned with pity, and definitely even sometimes self-pity. So it's, if we are sympathizing, we are feeling sorry for, we are having pity on, that is not what sympathy means. Sympathy says, I don't really truly comprehend or can't imagine what you're going through, but I can sympathize with you. And then that leads us to empathy. True empathy comes from your deep-rooted understanding of what's happening to another because you've experienced it yourself. That's true empathy. we can get what I'm going to coin my own new phrase here, reflective empathy, in that we can reframe something and we can view it through another person's perspective. But true empathy is met when you actually have been through something very, very similar. So, T, what are your thoughts on that? Agree, disagree? Am I way off base here?
No, I don't think you're way off base, but I would disagree a bit on the empathy, but you covered a little bit with what you're calling reflective empathy, in that
Yeah.
I think it's possible to have true empathy by drawing on a whole lifetime of experiences that may not even, under normal circumstances, be considered the same. So,
Okay, I see what you're saying. Yeah, I would agree.
So if I see someone who has, like, I don't consider myself having chronic illness, but I can have empathy in the fact that I can imagine what it would be like.
Yes.
And because I have been, let me use this as an example. So my husband's cancer really affects his digestive system. And sometimes he gets bloated, and he'll be bloated for days on end. And more than days, sometimes weeks and weeks and weeks. And because I've had an experience a couple of times for maybe a few hours of that bloated, tight feeling in my stomach, that may not even be what he's going through, but I know how miserable that makes me. I can look at him and have empathy of the idea.
Okay, I can, yes.
My brain can take that. My brain can take that and go and put that into an imagined experience.
Okay, so yes. So I would say that one thing that I do say is that it is all relative, right? So someone who, like you said, has minor gas could definitely empathize with someone.
That's all.
Okay, that was a bad word. Bloating.
Because not necessarily the gas.
Okay, let me rephrase that. Someone who has problems with bloating could, even if they only suffer it mildly, at least have some kind of empathetic response, because in their relative point of view, that's what they comprehend it to be, right?
I also think, like, in that case, that also fits what you were talking about as the definition. Having had that sense of bloatedness, I can draw on that. So that's an experience. But when I'm in sessions with clients, and let's say I have a client, most of my clients, let's say, like, not most of my clients, but some of my clients have been sexually assaulted. I don't have to have been sexually assaulted to have empathy for their situation and what they're going through, because in my definition of empathy, it's being able to understand, being able to put yourself in their shoes.
Okay.
I do want to say something on this, and it might have something to do with what you're going to talk about, Lori, and if it does, we'll figure that part out. But one of the things that I run into with my husband, and I think this is something for most chronic ill people, is when someone looks at them and says, "Oh, I get it. I understand what you're doing," and they've never experienced a chronic illness. That is almost the most defeating thing for him to hear. And then as his spouse, if I try to say, "Oh, I get it, I understand," and he comes back with that, then I just got defeated, because I'm trying. What I'm trying to say is I'm trying to understand. I'm trying to meet spirit.
Yes.
And I think it's so important to have this discussion about empathy, and I think that's why it's on your list.
It is, and I'm glad that you said that, because everyone copes differently and tries to help in their own way, but when we don't know or truly comprehend, our intentions can actually be more harmful than helpful. So to change that, I feel like we have to create and open up dialogue, which is one of those things that you said earlier. And I think that that is, I am totally okay with being held accountable. I am totally okay with a good friend of mine saying, I think I should tell you that I'm observing this, or that I'm seeing this pattern, or that, or what do you think about this? Or, you know what I mean? Again, like you said, if it were the person across the grocery store aisle, I might kind of be like, dude, you need to back up on out of my space. You have no idea who I am, what you're talking about, and I'm done listening to you. You know what I mean? That's just how I can get sometimes. Sorry, I'm the nicest person, really. I'm not normally that way, but there's this part of me that just kind of recoils sometimes because I've had so many people try to cure me, fix me, tell me they know it all, and I just kind of
I don't picture you.
get a
I
little.
picture you getting this funny laugh and look on your face.
So, as we've been talking, I think it's been really important to understand that what we're trying to tell people and folks that are listening to, please err on the side of belief. Please err on the side of encouragement, err on the side of compassion, err on the side of less is more sometimes, or because I think we just forget that, I don't know, we often, I feel, we have to fill the silence, we have to speak, we have to say something, we have to show that we're there, and then we end up doing or saying something that ends up being more harmful than helpful. And when you do those things, key, of course, is owning it. If you know that you did something, as T said, you should own it. So, because when we don't, and T, you had brought this up earlier, a lot of people don't realize this. I know I didn't, because I didn't struggle with depression before chronic illness. If you don't know me really well, my nicknames are Sunshine, Joy, Miss Happy, you know. A common response that I give out is Peachy Keen, Jelly Bean, like everything is fine. Right?
Energizer Bunny.
Yes, Energizer Bunny, Wonder Woman.
I attest to that one, both of that one.
Yes. So, but after chronic illness, after going through so many of these things that we've talked about, after dealing with all of this for a little more than a decade now, and then after the stroke, realizing through another stage of grief and loss that I had to change my absolute perception on what quality versus quantity meant. And I just really had to reevaluate everything. So having said all that, I think you'll find it easy to believe that isolation and depression come often when we, in quotations, look fine. And no one seems to believe our experiences. I had no idea. I honestly couldn't empathize with someone over what depression was until I went through a chronic illness. I have always been a person who finds the silver lining, seeks the silver lining. I've been called Pollyanna before. I've been called, naive, and she just doesn't know what a black cloud is. I do. I just, up until I ran into kind of the wall, if you will, of chronic illness, I had never really suffered from depression or isolation. I'm an extrovert. I I feed off people, right? We've talked about that. I sound like a vampire. So, but I am a person who recharges with being with others and all of that. And one of the things with chronic illness is there's a lot of fear, there's a lot of unknown, and you'd be surprised at how many people, can I catch it? Can I get it? What do I do? They don't know what to do, so they shy away. And so all of these scenarios prior to chronic illness, where I'm, the life of the party, if you will, and then I'm at home all by myself or in a hospital room, totally isolated, and then I've got everybody trying to cure me, fix me, tell me keep fighting, do this, do that, and I just became so overwhelmed that I learned how to put on that mask. And that mask was, I'm fine. I'm okay. I literally would say that and not even think about it. I'm going to confess that the words I'm okay are the biggest lie that I've, as an adult, that I've told for a long time. I'm okay. I'm fine. I'm okay.
Okay.
Life is good.
You know
Yeah,
what
I got
fine
this.
means, right?
Say that again?
You know what fine means, right?
Oh, no. What does it mean? Tell me.
Effed up, insecure, neurotic, and emotional.
Yes.
I heard that once, and I'm like, wow. That's what because,
Yeah.
A lot of times when I say I'm fine, I'm insecure about sharing how I feel, which is, I try not to use the word fine.
Yep. I really have tried very hard to stop using the word okay as much as possible. I try to say something like, well, today's a good day, or something like that. I try to say, just something that kind of makes light, because it's natural for me to do that. I don't even know, honestly. I don't. Another confession. Wow, I'm doing some very public confessions here. I don't know how to ask for help, and I don't know how to let people in. I'm really bad at it. It's never been my strong suit.
If I were to give you advice, Lori, I would say don't ask for help, delegate. You're good at that.
I like that. I like that. I like that. Delegate almost makes me feel like I'm working again.
Exactly.
There we go. I have purpose. Thank you. See, I am open to good advice. I like good advice. That was great. I love that. It's so funny. One of my friends was sitting across the couch from me tonight. We're watching the game, and I was talking with another friend, and I was literally describing the sliding door moving, and like and the person on the other end knew that I was trying to ask them, but I don't know how to, right? And I wanted them to get up and open the door. And he's a really good friend, and he was literally being obtuse. Like, he was just like, so what are you saying? What is it you're referring to? and Sarah reaches over. She's like, he's waiting for you to ask him to open the door. I was like, you jerk. Okay, yes, could you please open the door? Now, are you happy? I was like, oh my gosh. Oh, I was like, and then like the rest of the night, I got the teasing and harassing. Thank goodness these are some of my best friends. Teasing and harassing about, so did you ask? Did you, is that a full and complete question there?
Always
like,
just
wow.
It's a pretty good day I got out of bed.
Amen. I like that one. Any coping mechanisms for that kind of stuff on your side, EJ?
I usually just try to, like, it's not a coping mechanism, I guess. It's just, I know who I can talk to and truly vent to, and I know who, like, I'm not going to share my, business with the whole world, yet I'm talking about it on a podcast. So I guess that goes out the window.
We're not face to face. It's totally different.
Okay.
All bets are off.
I try to say, like, I'm hanging in there, because honestly, that's how I am every day. Like, I'm just hanging in there. Like, and I found a sign and going through some of my mom's stuff, a little picture, cat picture that's literally a little kitten hanging on a little piece of rope, and it says, hanging in there, hang in there. Yeah. Or Lord, help me hang in there. And I'm like, amen. That's what I'm doing every day when I walk out that door. Just so and I'm not trying to use it as like a crutch or anything, but it's just like, I honestly, like, I'm hanging in there. I am dealing with today. I am hanging out. I am getting what I need to do today done as best I can. And if I can't respond to everything tonight or tonight, today, it can wait till tomorrow. And, a lot of people will, ask for more. And that's cool, and I'm willing to share. But I think I've talked before on the podcast, I don't like to overwhelm people. Right. And oftentimes when I have talked about, like, the struggles I've gone through, like with my parents and the struggles I had, or sometimes with my chronic illness, they're like befuddled or like really baffled that I've gone through so much. Right. And are, amazed that I'm still standing, which I give all the credit to God on that, honestly.
Amen. Amen.
And, so yeah, I don't know, like, I know, Lori, you've got your,
God willing and the creeks don't rise.
That one, yeah.
That's my favorite phrase.
Which, to me, it's like kind of corny, but it's a way, it's like, it's a good way of saying, like, I'll be there if this happens, and we never know what day to day is going to look like. I might wake up tomorrow and have a stomach ache and have a headache and not be able to function, and I still have to go through my day. Or I might wake up and feel okay. So it's like I got to take every day one step at a time.
So that's really great, because this really does lead into that idea of belief. We want to err on the side of believing someone's experiences, because they're not ours, and we don't know. So really good example of this. One of the chronic illness groups I had, somebody said she's talking and she's sharing, and she says, yeah, I have, and now I can't remember what it's called. Maybe EJ will recall it, but it was, I'm allergic to exercise. Okay, I'm not going to lie, ladies. I literally almost spewed, like, what I was drinking.
Exercise you to carry.
There you go. Yeah. I literally was like, my gut response was, yeah, me too. And like, I did not say that. Luckily, I have much more composure than that. And and if this person is listening to the podcast, because it's a good friend of mine, I hope she doesn't become offended by that. But like, I literally held it together and I was like, really? Tell me more about that, because I have no idea what you're talking about, and so then she proceeded to share, what that meant, because I was like, I've never heard of this. What is this? Tell me more. And that was my way of not being rude and trying to err on the side of belief. Like, oh, okay, tell me more. I don't know anything about this. I'm open ears. I'm an open book, share with me. And but it was really interesting, because just a couple of years later, EJ, I think you'll know who we're talking about, we met another woman who said, oh yeah, I have that too. And I'm thinking, wow, this is really okay. Like, I just had never heard of it before, and it sounded, I thought I was watching a Saturday Night Live shtick, and the punchline was supposed to be coming next. I didn't know it was a thing, but it really is. So I just think it's really, really, really important to err on the side of belief and try to not wait for the punchline, if you will.
Yeah, and to kind of explain like what that is in case y'all are like, what is that? It's I don't know the specifics of it, but what it can cause is like you basically break out, have an allergic reaction when you overexert yourself during exercise.
I was just going to say, because we release chemicals and hormones and whatnot when we're exercising into our muscles, and a lot of that, from what I don't know anything about it particularly, but just understanding the biology of chemicals and hormones, it can cause a reaction in our body, and our body may try to attack it.
So I know this is going to sound a little corny again, but this is another one of my great-grandmother's sayings, you know, you'll learn something new every day if you want to. You can be a closed book and not. But if you're an open book and you're willing to err on the side of belief and err on the side of, that sounds fascinating, tell me more, then you're going to get a lot farther and people are going to be far less hurt, you know, and learn something new.
And there's the old cliche about, you know, you can catch flies with honey. Not
yes.
Which is kind of the same thing, you know, if you are willing to be graceful and understanding and willing to learn something, you can get a lot further in a relationship with somebody who has a chronic illness than if you just make a quick-witted statement, not understanding everything that they're talking about. And I do understand that there are some people who use laughter, jokes, humor as a medicine or a response tactic.
I don't know anyone like that.
Says the giggler.
Which it's okay in certain situations.
Time and place, always.
Yes, time and place. Good job. Yep.
And, you know, and that comes with those people who have that as their coping mechanism can sometimes need to learn, and they do learn, like, when they turn that on and when they turn that off. And for me, like, I'm a processor. So, like, normally when somebody gives me information, it's just a nod of my head, and I'm like, okay, and then I move on. Not because I want to move on, but it's because I want to think about what they just told me before I panic, freak out, ask more questions, or, you know,
That would be a great tool of communication right there. Great tool of communication. See, and I wasn't even there last week. So, kind of moving right towards wrapping up, if you have somebody in your life who has been diagnosed with a chronic illness, friend, family member, you know, somebody, a fellow student, a coworker, you know, I honestly believe that the best way that you can help us is to ask us directly how you can help your friend or your family member. If there are 47 different kinds of liver disease, and I didn't realize that until I was diagnosed, I really don't know how to help somebody with that diagnosis. I have to ask questions. I have to be inquisitive, not like the grocery store person, but because, like you said, Tina, time and place, right? But I have to be open. And that's what I talked earlier about, creating an opening dialogue. Because without that, a whole lot of assumptions are made on everybody's part. And then feelings are hurt, you know. And sometimes friendships and family division is caused because we don't create and open the dialogue. Anybody else?
Yeah, I'd like to. I have a couple things I want to add in.
Good.
First of all, being the spouse of someone who's chronically ill, one of the things that I did, because that's also its own unique spot to be in
Yes.
is not only to be a spouse, but someone close to
Right.
someone with a chronic illness, especially if they're in
Then you have your best
contact
friend.
right, contact on a regular basis. A really handy thing to do is look for support groups. Lori's been
Amen.
talking about support groups for the chronically ill. I found that I went and looked for support groups for the support of chronically ill.
Right.
So,
Yeah.
and
Most hospitals have one.
right, and I found one like on Facebook, and I ended up leaving it because it became a very negative thing and wasn't what I was looking for. But there for a while, it was very good because one of the things, just a little insight for my situation is, I remember one day I was just feeling really overwhelmed, and I remember sitting there thinking, God, I wish I could just get away for a day, just a day. And then it hit me like out of nowhere, of like, yeah, but he can't.
Right. Right.
He doesn't ever get to get a break. I could, I may choose not to, but he has no choice. And so it was an epiphany on the one hand, but it was really depressing on the other. So I really needed some help getting some perspective on that.
Right.
So always seek help. That's always an option.
Right. We talk
And then
about that a lot in this group.
Mhm. And then I want to pull back out a little bit away from chronic illness and say all of these do's and don'ts that Lori has talked about are just good advice in general. I mean, think about it. We don't know someone's story, and we don't have to know their story to have compassion for them. We don't have to know their story to not judge a person, because it is just that we don't know. We have no idea what got that person to that point in life. And so if we want a little bit of grace for our own selves, for our own situations, a little compassion, a little bit empathy, then we certainly can give it to others without knowing for a fact that person's chronically ill.
So I know that not everybody is of faith, and we, all three of us have, we profess our faith, we talk about our faith, and it really reminds me of that scripture from Galatians 6:2, where it talks about bearing one another's burdens, and in this way you'll fulfill the law of Christ. But what if you're not a person of faith? What if that's not your thing? As T said, you can still be a good Samaritan. You can still be a good citizen. You can still find compassion, empathy, sympathy, and you can still engage in those morally healthy, because I don't want to say right or wrong, right? Morally healthy actions and conversations and things that we do. You don't have to be a faithful person to engage in that kind of behavior.
If it helps with a little bit of perspective, the studies show in the mental health field that gratitude, positive psychology, all of those things that we've been listing off fit under those umbrellas. The study after study after study shows that people have far more contentment if they engage in positive attitude and gratitude and kindness and compassion. They have very high numbers of overall life satisfaction. And if you want more information on that, look at Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Just Google it.
Oh yes.
And
That's an important one.
it's under that, it's got that same concept. So yeah, definitely it doesn't have to be pigeonholed into being a faith thing, a religious thing, morally sound thing. Even if it's just life satisfaction, just based on that, gratitude and positivity are huge factors.
Amen. Amen. EJ, did you want to contribute anything there?
Not necessarily, but I was thinking I'd throw it out to the listeners, and ask, have you guys experienced different receptions when you shared a chronic illness? Have you responded differently to somebody because of their chronic illness when you found out about it? Have you had to take care of somebody? Are there other do's and don'ts that we didn't cover that you think are equally important?
Please share with us. Yeah.
Share. We would love to hear what you have to say and what you what you think, because I think we can talk day and night about this kind of stuff. And, we talked, communication is definitely important, and there's all sorts of ways to do that. And I know for me, like, not only do I have chronic illnesses, but I did take care of my mom going through cancer treatment. I did help take care of my dad for
You
some
also
time.
are now a caregiver as a profession.
I also am now professionally a caregiver, so I've seen it in numerous different points of view. And at this moment, I am grateful for the chronic illness group that Lori has talked about.
I love that group.
Because we are able to kind of let down our guard a little bit more. Not that I put up a guard, but we do talk about here. We wear masks. Everybody's gonna wear a mask of some kind.
And they're not all bad.
You can say it or not.
T would remind us of.
Right. They are not all. Yeah, they're not all bad.
I would guess that it must be a relief to be able to talk to others with chronic illness in an open way, because you don't want your loved ones to feel bad. You don't want them to feel like they're messing it all up and they can't do anything right.
Right. Which is why I said I always help those that are chronically ill realize we have to be accountable to.
Right. And I know that when I got involved with that group on Facebook, the point was to be able to say the things that I needed to say without feeling guilty or making my husband feel like he was a burden, because he was not a burden. His illness is a burden.
Right.
It's a burden to both of us.
Right.
So I would extend to the listeners as well, for those who are close to someone who's chronically ill. What are things that you would want to know more about as the support system? Not what is being demanded of you by the chronically ill person, because they're not demanding it.
Right.
But you may feel like it.
Yes.
But more of, what is it you need from that loved one to help them?
Right.
So to speak.
Amen. So I know that we're approaching quite a long time of being on here, and we want to be respectful of everyone's time. I think that I know we're laughing.
Then she goes on.
I think that this would be a great opportunity to let's talk next time in 2 weeks. Let's talk about caregivers specifically, some of their needs, some of their desires. And I'm really hoping that people will respond on Facebook, respond on Instagram, Twitter, email us. You've got all those ways to get in touch with us. I really hope that you'll do that, and we'll put those in there and we'll talk about them. But I think that it would be great to let's continue this like we did with communication. There's so much to say. I also do want to briefly in the next one touch on kind of that spoon theory and kind of some healthy boundaries. I always like to say this, and I know several times through tonight's talk, we've talked about research. And I just feel like before we close out, it's really important to mention how important safe, reliable, accurate research is what we're going for.
Know your sources.
Know your sources.
And Wikipedia is not one of them.
Right. And neither are most of your .coms. Most of those are generated by ads for different medications, different companies, different platforms. So you really want to stay away from a lot of the .coms, WebMD, probably not my favorite go-to. But you want to stick with the .orgs, .govs, some of your major research hospitals like the Mayo, Cleveland Clinic, St. Jude's. You really want to know that, because I know everybody knows this now. I think it's Jeff Foxworthy that has that whole little funny bit, about the side effects of medication. It may cause this and it may do that. And it may, right?
Oh, yeah.
When you go online,
Yeah.
and one of the other blue collar guys even said something, my mom went online and she has a prostate problem, and, and I literally
Doesn't
started
even have
busting
one.
up because you can go online and you're like, I'm dying of some kind of cancer that isn't even in this country, or we don't even have, or, so just be careful.
So Dr. Google
Yeah, no,
is not
please
a
don't go to
reliable
just
source.
Dr. Google. I love that. So just want to put
So-
that out there into the universe. So
And that's great advice as far as like the .orgs, .nets, .govs. But
Mhm.
also another thing you can do is just question, how do they know what they know?
yes, please ask questions.
And where did they get that knowledge from?
Yes. Never
Those
assume.
things matter.
Never assume that they just know. Yeah, good call.
Right. And that's why you find when you get a medical journal article or
Scholarly
a,
articles.
Cleveland Clinic, there's going to be equal almost amounts
Oh my
of
gosh,
references that they used to research
Facts upon
what they
facts
just
upon
wrote about.
facts.
And while yes, Wikipedia does have that, the thing about Wikipedia is it is editable by anybody that has a free account on there. So somebody who doesn't know anything about it could go on there and explain something in one of the descriptions, hit save, and it's out there for the world.
Right.
And so anybody could change that. And while yes, much of that information is probably very accurate or accurate enough to get by, there is some that can be mistaken for accurate facts that are not facts. And Wikipedia is not the only one, but there are, and that's why they're saying, be careful with the .coms. I have a web design degree, so this is kind of my wheelhouse. Definitely .gov, because that's
.orgs
your
are your
websites.
colleges.
Those are your official. Yeah.
EDUs.
No,
Thank you.
EDUs
Thank
are
you. I knew I
colleges.
missed one.
Orgs are like the diabetes hotline, or like the National Red Cross. Those are probably orgs because they're organizations, usually nonprofits, who are only funded by donations. But they have teams of people that research this stuff, that work for them, that help
They're
them
vetted.
out,
Yes, vetted.
and scholars.
And they're not
that
driven by the
they're
bottom
vetted
line.
And also, looking for articles that have been peer reviewed,
Yes.
research that's been peer reviewed, so they've been replicated or are able to be replicated.
Love it.
Is important.
Yes.
And then
perfect.
another thing too, I would encourage if anybody's going to do their research, is maybe I'm sure there's free courses to learn about statistics, because one of the most common problems I find, two of the most common problems I find is, one, people don't understand the letter N, and that's the number of people who were involved, who the research was done on. And the bigger the number, sometimes the better.
Yeah.
If it's a case of one, that really doesn't prove much. And then the other piece is understanding that correlation does not mean causation. And I'd like to share a real brief example of that.
Amen.
So if someone told you that in Arizona, when murder goes up, so does the sale of ice cream, does that mean that murder causes the sale of people to buy ice cream, or that people buying ice cream are more likely to murder? No, that's just a correlation. It does not include. It doesn't tell you all of the variables that are involved. It just says, hey, when ice cream sales up, so does go up, so does murder. What we don't take into consideration is that third factor, and that's the heat of Arizona.
Right.
So correlation is not causation.
Very good.
Just a quick
No, good to
pedestal.
say. All right, EJ, take us out.
Just a friendly reminder that anything discussed in this podcast, again, is not to be used as a diagnosis or a replacement for conversations with your own doctors, therapists, psychologists, or other medical professionals. This episode is available on Anchor, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and more. We're on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram as BehindTheMaskPC, and will soon be on YouTube. If you don't use social media, you can also email us at BehindTheMaskPC@gmail.com. Feel free to review us on Anchor, leave feedback on the platform you listen to us on, or message us through our social media or email, because we'd love to hear what you think. If there's a topic you'd like to hear us talk about, feel free to message us and we'll see about making that happen. You can find EJ on Twitter and Instagram as EJ8302 and T at her YouTube channel, T's Life Lessons. If you'd like to keep these episodes coming, you can monetarily support us by visiting anchor.fm/BehindTheMaskPC/support. And on behalf of T, Lori, and myself, thank you for listening, and we'll talk to you next time.